Good day, everyone. My name is Vince Gellman. Thank you for joining me today. So, it is abundantly clear to me that the dark forces, and it's likely abundantly clear to you as well, they do not want us thinking with nuance. They do not want us perceiving from nuance or having what's called subtle perception. They don't want nuanced perception, subtle perception, intuitive perception. They do not want a perception that senses the gray in between the black and white. They do not want a perception that reads between the lines and what's not being said, what's being hidden behind the veneer of, we're here to take care of you. We're here to save the earth. We're here to take care of your health. We're here to protect you. They don't want that. They want you to take literal what they're saying. They want you to take literal their words. It's very black and white, their philosophy, which is a hallmark of trauma. Trauma is a black and white psychology. Trauma is a black and white psychology, and their psychological warfare is black and white. Coercion is black and white. Coercion isn't about gray. It's black and white. It's do this and don't do that. And if you don't do what we're saying, there's a consequence. So it is very black and white. And so the nature of a traumatized psychology or psychophysiology is black and white. It's black and white thinking. So I'm giving you a lot of information off the top here. So what I want you to understand is their language set is if we look carefully, if we understand trauma, if we understand the nature of trauma, the nuance of trauma, their language set, the way they speak, the way the dark forces communicate, the way our leaders speak from the podium, it's not about nuance, and it's certainly not about imagination. It's not about intuition. It is this is the way it is. Trust the science. We know the science. They're basically saying, we know what's best for you. We tell you what you need to believe. Believe it. We know what you ought to be thinking. We know what you ought to be doing. So it is a coercive psychological warfare. It's a coercive, this is it. It's a might is right language set. So if we understand trauma, let's look at trauma for a second. When we're scared as children, we realize, and I've talked about this many times, we realize as scared children that we need to be a certain way in order to survive our adverse childhood experiences, to garner as much approval, safety, and love as possible, and to mitigate negative consequences. If I am good, if I am obedient, if I am smart, if I am tough, then I will maximize attachment. I will maximize approval, love, safety. If I'm a certain way, then I will mitigate the possibility of being punished, of being harmed, of being spanked, of being abused, of being grounded, of being yelled at, of being neglected. So what happens is that children go from having a very wide open playground of perception, a wide open playground of ways of being, to more narrow possibilities. You see, a healthy child is a fluid child. A healthy system is fluidity. That's what a healthy system is. It's a fluid system. It's a soft system. It's an open system. It's a receptive system. It's a spontaneous system. It's an adaptable, flexible system. By the way, those are all qualities of play. It's a curious system. And yet, what happens is that when we're scared, we contract. We contract in our musculature, but we also contract in our psychology. We start to think in a certain way and behave in a certain way and perceive in a certain way to ensure safety and survival. So our world shrinks and shrinks, and we start using more and more black and white language. We use more and more black and white thinking. I need to be this way and not that way, right? I need to say this, but not that. I need to sit a certain way so that I don't get hit. I need to be a certain way at the dinner table. I need to say things at a certain time and not say things at a certain time. So we're losing our spontaneity, we're losing our fluidity, we're losing our touch with our rainbow soul. The rainbow soul, which is an infinite spectrum of colors. It's no longer safe to be red, it's no longer safe to be green, it's no longer safe to be blue. I need to be yellow and maybe orange sometimes. Those are the safe colors. Those are the acceptable colors in my home. That's what's going to garner the most love, most approval, most safety. It's what's going to mitigate harm most. Is this making sense? So our world shrinks. Then we go to the school system and we are taught to think a certain way. This is right, this is wrong. In early education, early childhood education, which is more play-based, it's less about logical black and white thinking. It's more about exploration, it's more about curiosity, it's more about imagination. But the higher we move into the grades, it's more academic, it's more, this is right and this is wrong. And you're going to get graded on it, you're going to get rated, you're going to get compared, ranked, and possibly shamed at school in front of the classroom or at home, or you might get punished at home for not thinking right enough. What's interesting is if you look at the word right and you look at the word wrong, how many letters do they have in total? It's 5 plus 5 equals 10, right? 5 plus 5 equals 10. Let's look at black and white. How many letters are in the word black and how many letters in the word white? There's 5 plus 5, 10. So black, white, right, wrong, it's 5 plus 5 equals 10. Now imagine, look at 10, 1, 0. Now spread out a whole bunch of ones and zeros all over the place. 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. What do you have? You have binary coding for a computer. So what happens is that we get programmed into binary thinking. We get programmed into a right, wrong, very dualistic, rigid way of being, which is based in survival. If you are trying to escape a very difficult situation, if you are being attacked, if you have an intruder coming in your home, you got one shot to get out. It's not about gray. It's like, I need to get this right. I need to get out. I need to escape through that door at this particular time. If you're a refugee and you're trying to escape a war-torn country, it's not about gray. It's about black and white. You got to get it right. And yes, sometimes we do need to get things right. If I'm working on my balance sheet, I got to think in black and white language. If I'm doing my bookkeeping, I need to get it right. If you're fixing a carburetor in a car, you got to get it right. You need to do it. Sometimes we need black and white thinking, but black and white thinking outside of these contexts of fixing a car and doing bookkeeping is about survival. It's about, I need to get it right to survive. I need to get it right to mitigate harm. I need to get it right. I need to be a certain way to survive this very toxic, volatile, unpredictable, abusive home. Is this making sense, what I'm saying? So look at the language of the oligarchs. Look at the language of our government, of our presidents, prime ministers, standing at their podium. It is black and white, psychological warfare. They don't want nuanced thinking. They don't want gray thinking. They want you to follow orders. If you're in the military and you're listening to your commander, I don't know anything about the military, but if, whoever is in charge, your sergeant, your lieutenant, whoever is giving the orders, is black and white. You follow those orders. It's not about gray. You get up, you get out of bed, you stand in line, and it's done in a certain way, and it's done at a certain time. So this is the way they're speaking to us is a very toxic, military, controlling, coercive, black and white language, and they do not want nuanced thinking. Nuanced thinking, subtle perception is a threat. It's a threat to them. Now, where were we trained not to think in nuance? Obviously, the education system. Think of the worksheet, okay? You have your worksheet, you got your worksheet, and you got your lines, okay? You were taught to read the lines, you were taught to memorize the lines, you were taught to write a certain way on those lines, you were taught to write certain things on those lines, but were you encouraged to read between the lines? Were you encouraged to read between the lines? Were you encouraged to question? Or how much of questioning going back into your life or going back into history has been portrayed as disruptive? Disruptive questioning. Well, that's what the great leaders do. The great leaders, the great luminaries, the great prophets, they're great disruptors. And they encourage others to be disruptors. They encourage others to be dissenters. They encourage others to ask the questions that are not being asked. They encourage people to critically think. They encourage people to have subtle perception, to perceive from nuance. Where does the child find most joy on that worksheet? Not on the lines, but in the margins. In the margins. The margins is the playground. The margin is where a child doodles. Doodling is not linear. Show me a doodling that a child does that's linear, that's straight lines. It's not linear. Linearity is that binary thinking. It's that black and white. It's that right and wrong. Doodling is non-linear. It's the nature of the right brain. It's the nature of the heart. It's the nature of the soul. It's the nature of imagination and intuition and the gray of nuance. That's where children express their heart and their soul is in the non-dual terrain of the margins. By the way, that's where all the masters hang out. That's where all the prophets hang out, is in the margins. They're doodling away over there. But we are taught to fit in along those lines in the worksheet. Fit in, conform, obey, be obedient, follow those straight lines. Don't read between the lines. Don't question too much. Don't look underneath the covers. Follow our orders. The school system has been about, here's what you need to believe. Here's what we want you to think. It's not been about teaching children how to think. It's about teaching children what to think. That's memorization. Education is related to the word educe, to draw out. That means we must turn to the soul, we must turn to the heart, and that's where intuition and imagination and nuance lives. The left logical brain is where black and white lives. It's where right and wrong lives, and we do need some of that. Again, we need right and wrong to do bookkeeping, to fix a carburetor. I hope my mechanic is thinking black and white when he's fixing my carburetor. I hope he is. I don't want him to say, maybe this, maybe that. No, I want him to get it right. Don't you? When it comes to things like the safety of an engine or the safety of your how to fly a plane that you want your pilot to fly it right. Okay, so we need that sometimes. We need logic. Logic isn't the bad guy. But the language of the oligarchs right now, the language of the oligarchs is a coercive, it's the language of trauma. It's the language of trauma, and I want you to see it that way. It is a traumatized language set. It's black and white. And this should be a clue to anyone that they are not coming from good intentions, because they're using coercive language. They're using language of, I know what's best for you. There are certain times when someone does know what's best for you. Most of the time when you're a little child, right? Sometimes of course mother knows what's best, father knows what's best. Hold on, don't cross the street yet. Sometimes people know what's best. Maybe we need help to know how to put our life jacket on. And there's a certain way to do that. And that person knows what's best. And we trust that. So I'm not against that. I'm saying, though, right now we have a nanny state mentality, a nanny state where these people are acting like helicopter parents, believing they know how to protect us and know what to protect us from. They're using coercive language. You see, people are so used to, in our society, from cradle to grave, being told, they're so used to being told what to think, what to do, what to believe. They're so used to their psychological adaptation from childhood, their survival adaptation of being a certain way. They're so used to a society where it is unsafe to question. They're so used to a psychological adaptation that is stuck in binary logic versus the nuance of the heart. They're used to a traumatized, rigid society and psychobiology. They're used to black and white. And so for them, it's not safe to question. It's not safe to think with nuance. It's not safe to listen to their intuition. It's safer just to listen to what other people have to tell them. There's a convenience in that. Oh, I'm just going to give my power away to that person and they're going to tell me what's best. I'm going to give my power away to that person. It's just much easier. It's easier that way. This is a pandemic of convenience. It's just more convenient if I just believe they know what's best for my health. It's just much more convenient if I just believe the authorities. I don't have to be the authority then. I don't have to be the authority. I don't have to listen to my heart. I just give my power away to them. It's much easier that way, and that's what we've done since we were children. I'm going to give my power away to mommy, to daddy, to the school teacher, to the minister, to the institution here and the institution there. I don't have to critically think. I don't have to listen to my intuition. It's just so much easier. It's much more convenient if I allow other people to think for me. Well, this is normal. We have so many examples going back in history of what happens when people stand too brightly in their authority. When people are too strong in their disruptive questioning, well, they get killed. They get sent to the cross. They get sent to the stake, burnt at the stake. So yes, there are consequences to living in our truth and in our light and our power, and a lot of resistance towards doing that comes from past life memories of being persecuted, of being killed, of being tortured. We have those memories still in us where there were significant consequences for being a disruptor, being a dissenter. But the stakes are too high now. We really, we need to be in our truth. We need to question. We need to be disobedient. Obedience really means about being obedient to ourselves. We need to be obedient to our heart. We must have the courage to have subtle perception. We must have the courage not to read the lines, but to read between the lines. To consider that maybe there's a sinner behind that seeming saint standing at the podium. There's some profane behind that seeming profoundness, profundity that's at the podium. That's coming across with such altruism. Maybe there's some sinister behavior behind that philanthropy. Maybe it's not philanthropy. Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe that's just a good front. You see, if I just believe philanthropy, then I'm just reading those lines on the sheet. But do I have the courage to say, or to think, well, maybe that's not actually it. But you see, we were conditioned to take things at literal face value. We are raised with a literalness in our mind, a literal perception. This is it. This is reality. That person has our best interests at heart. This is what history is about. This is history, right? We were taught to look at things a particular way. We were taught to be a certain way, and therefore we look at these so-called leaders and we don't see what's beyond their veneer of altruism. Do we have the courage to access our subtle perception? Do we have the courage to read between the lines? Do we have the courage to question authority? Do we have the courage to question period? Do we have the courage to not accept things at face value? You see, again, our survival has been dependent on accepting things at face value, at believing our leaders, at believing our authorities, at doing what we're told. Our survival has been dependent on seeing things a certain way and being a certain way. And what's happening now in this absurd, insane theater is, as it's getting more absurd, as it's becoming more insane, it's actually forcing people to break out of this hypnotic survival adaptation. It's forcing people, because things are getting so extreme, so absurd, so insane, it's forcing people to finally wake up and say, wait a second, maybe things aren't what they seem. That's the blessing of things getting so absolutely crazy, absurd, insane, because even for the staunch, I must take things literal person. For the staunch, I must believe authority person. For that person, even for that person, they can break free of that finally. Because things are getting just absolutely that absurd. You know, you have the Nord Stream pipeline burst a few months ago, and you have the government, the security state apparatus saying that it was Russia that blew up its own pipeline. Now, if that is absolutely absurd, if that is absolutely insane, all they had to do was turn the tap off. Why would they blow up their own pipeline? If they wanted to stop the pipeline, all they had to do was turn the tap off. And yet, that is still not enough for so many people. That still makes sense for them. Oh, okay, it was the Russians. The Russians blew up their own pipeline. So it must get very extreme for a lot of people for them to break out of this hypnotic, obedient, being a certain way, perceiving a certain way state, for them to finally break free and to have the courage to not accept the literal reality that's being presented, but to perceive beyond that through subtle perception, through intuition, using critical thinking. And so you see, that is why subtle perception, intuition, critical thinking as well is a threat to the oligarchs. It's an absolute threat, and they are the architects of the school system. They are the architects of the school system. They wanted to create conformist, obedient, compliant mindsets. Mindsets that don't question but take things at face value. I repeat a study, and I got so many of these studies, but I repeat a study I found that showed in school that children who were the most creative in school garnered the least amount of favoritism from their school teachers. Children who were the most creative in school garnered the least amount of favoritism from their school teachers. So, when funding goes south in schools, when funding goes south, what are the programs that get cut first? It's the arts, music, theater, not academia. So we have been brainwashed and conditioned to be left brain dominant. We have been brainwashed and conditioned to be literally oriented. And with that literalism, with that left brain dominance, we deny our heart intelligence and give power away to those ones who are telling us to trust the science, who are coming across as saying, as knowing that they believe what is best for us, what is best for the greater good. They're saying, this is what's best for your health, this is what's best for the greater good. But what we know in our hearts is that what they're really saying is, this is what's best for our greater good at your expense, at your welfare. They do not give a shit about our welfare. They do not give a shit about our safety and our good. And therefore, they do not want us questioning. They do not want us perceiving from a place of nuance. They do not want us reading between the lines. They do not want us dueling in the margins. They want us staying in the status quo of conformist reality, where we bow to their power instead of bowing to our own, where we're obedient to their false power instead of being obedient to our true power. So this is what we can, so I encourage you, when you listen to them, hear traumatized language. It's a traumatized language set that appeals to traumatized psychologies. It's a coercive, I know what's best for you, right, wrong, black and white, abrasive, tyrannical language set that appeals to the psychology of traumatized individuals who are stuck in survival adaptations around obedience and conformity. It fits them. Someone who's stuck in victimhood, well, that's perfect for the person that comes along and portrays themselves as a savior. They're the savior for my victimhood. So they're playing off of traumatized psychologies. They're playing off of traumatized trauma survival adaptations. And it's time we wake up to this. They know what they're doing. They're leveraging fear. They're using fear and to leverage fear in people. They're playing off of these fears. And it's time to wake up. It's time to see the sinner behind the perceived saint. It's time to see the profane behind the perceived profundity. It's time to see the evil behind the philanthropy. It's time to read between the lines. It's time to get real, because our dignity, our self-worth, and our freedom and our health depend on it, as do that of our children and grandchildren. So, those are my words for you. For more on this, everyone, please check out my free ebook. Just recently published it. I'll put a link in the description. I'm really excited about it. It's a free ebook. It's called The Global Crucifixion: Truth, Heartbreak, and Humanity's Heroic Ascension into a Golden Age. Link in the description. Please like, share, subscribe, click notification, all that jazz. Thanks for listening and watching. Take care.